Wonderful. All right. So to begin our virtual meeting here today, I'd like to begin with a land acknowledgement. I would like to acknowledge that I am situated today on UBC's Vancouver campus, which is situated on the traditional, ancestral, and unceded territory of the Musqueam, Tsleil-Waututh, and Squamish First Nations. I'm honored to be able to live and work on this land. In this online format, I would also like to acknowledge that there may be many different places that we're all coming from. And so I'd encourage us all to take a moment to acknowledge the lands that we are individually situated on. Some of you may be familiar with the resource nativeland.ca. I'll just put it in the chat here. It's a really great tool for figuring out what land you are situated on and to further acknowledge that. My name is Ingrid White, as you can see, and I'm a member of UBC's Sustainability Ambassador Program. I'm also in my third year studying geographical science and a learner just curious about how we can be more sustainable in our lives. So I'm super excited today to be moderating this discussion and engage in learning more about local sustainability within Canada. The plan for today is to go through just a quick introduction of our panelists, and then we'll begin the discussion. The chat is disabled for kind of broad view, but you can always submit questions and any of the panelists or myself will be able to see those questions and then pose them to the group. So you're encouraged as the questions come up to submit them, but we'll definitely try at the end to have some time to address any questions that aren't addressed during the conversation. All right, so without further ado, I'll just give a brief introduction of our panelists and then they'll take the floor to tell us a little bit more about what they do. So our first panelist here is Paul Long, and he's joining us as the president and founder of Anion Clothing. Anion is a circular fashion company with its clothing designed in Victoria, manufactured in Vancouver, and retail locations in both respective cities. Then we have Lisa McAnulty, who is the Sustainability and Innovation Specialist at Ecologist. Ecologist is a slow apparel company focused on producing environmentally conscious clothing. Ecologist has their headquarters in Victoria, as well as other locations in Victoria and Whistler, BC. Heidi Colley is an ambassador and product educator with Knix. Knix is a Canadian company that sells a range of intimate wear, focusing on minimizing environmental degradation. Knix has its locations both in Canada and the US, including locations in Toronto, Ottawa, and Vancouver. All right, and now I'd like to pass the floor on to Paul, just to give us a little introduction.
Hi, thanks for, sorry. Hi Ingrid, thank you for having us and thank you UBC for having us. I also just want to respectfully acknowledge that we operate in Victoria, which is the Lekwungen Nation, as well as the Coast Salish people. So as you mentioned, we are based out of Victoria and Vancouver. Anion specializes in recycled textiles, specifically post-consumer recycled textiles. So we do a recarting program. In short, or in layman terms, we take your old clothing that ends up in textile landfills and we shred it down into a usable mulch and then respin it back into a usable fiber, which we then weave and create our clothing out of. So I'm wearing one of our shirts right now. I don't know if you can really see it, but there's absolutely no new dyes in any of our woven textiles. We just use the pre-existing colorways in the post-consumer waste that we have sourced out of the soft landfills itself. So I started Anion in 2013 with the intention of making all Canadian goods. And as my journey developed, I realized that there were no more industrial mills left in Canada. So I started sourcing textiles from around the world. And it's taken us about 4 to 5 years now to sort of hone in our post-consumer recycled textiling process. So all of our goods are made over in Vancouver. We've proudly made all of our goods in Canada since the inception. I started out sewing our t-shirts before we moved to seamstresses in Victoria and Vancouver. And then eventually we were able to develop our own markers and everything and move into full factories themselves. So our main factory is just in East Van right now. Yeah, so our whole shtick from the beginning is the most environmental, I guess, piece of clothing is the piece of clothing that already exists. And that's why we use post-consumer waste textiles. So that's sort of the brief overview of Anion. As mentioned, we have a store in Kitsilano in Vancouver, as well as another one here in Victoria.
Thanks so much, Paul. And then, yeah, if I'd just like to pass the floor on to Lisa, if she'd like to give an introduction.
Sorry, classic Zoom technical difficulties here, but I just want to make sure that I'm able to go to this first slide here. Okay, perfect. So ecologists and I respectfully acknowledge the traditional, ancestral, and unceded territory of the Lekwungen, Squamish, Lil'wat, and all Coast Salish peoples on whose land we live, work, and play. For who I am, feel free to add me on LinkedIn. My name is Lisa McAnulty, and I am the Sustainability and Innovation Specialist here at Ecologist. And what I really want to start with here is something that's been declared by the United Nations Human Rights Council. So a clean, healthy, and sustainable environment is a human right. From that basis, we sort of look at this through, how we operate through this lens. When we talk about sustainability and the definition of that, it's really the ability to be maintained at a certain rate or level, avoidance of the depletion of natural resources in order to maintain an ecological balance, meeting our needs without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs, and then innovation. So we look at incremental and disruptive innovation. Incremental is sort of step-by-step, taking incremental actions that basically help to build progress over time, whereas a disruptive innovation is something that really challenges the status quo of how things are being developed at the moment. Something that can be identified like that would be the motor vehicle, for example. We get places faster. The entire behavioral aspects of what people do, how they transport themselves, has been effectively changed forever. No longer are we traveling on horses or things like that. We can get places faster. Aero technology also would be something like that. In terms of textile development, we think the fly knit, no waste really there in terms of the 3D knitting possibilities. So really, we're bringing something new into existence that was not previously thought possible. And within all of this, we're constantly considering people, planet, and purpose for ecologists. I think it's really important to also understand where we hold ourselves accountable and what benchmarks we're looking at. So Canada has a global commitment to protect and conserve 30% of lands and waters by 2030. So to align ourselves with this, we also need to take into consideration the Sustainable Development Goals. So from an ecologist perspective, we focus on 4 key areas. One of them is clean water and sanitation, decent work and economic growth, life below water, and responsible consumption and production. I feel like this is very much targeted to what we're talking about today, but we'll move along here a little bit faster. So who we are, we've operated as Sitka over 20 years ago until today, with a transition to ecologist in 2018. So some things that you can understand the commitments we've made over time. We're 1% for the Planet certified, Surfrider and Green Business certified. We were a finalist for the EcoStar Awards last year. We're carbon neutral. We also offset our shipping through Pachama, which is a Shopify integration. And we also pay our staff a family living wage. So really important to consider, again, all factors in our business. Really what we're here to do is disrupt the industry and create a paradigm shift in how people interact with people, products, and the planet. Some of the things that you might see from us in terms of how we message that, made here at the Ecologist Factory, which is just on the left of me here, made here in North America. We offer repairs for life and for nature, so using natural materials. And then our people, so we launched a factory location. This is what it looks like in the image here. And really this was last year. Anyone could come in and see clothing being made. So you sort of build that personal relationship with the products that are being produced here. We also have an opportunity for all employees to be co-owners of the business, which is really impactful for future growth and development. And also we have a few teams, so retail, marketing and story, people, product and sustainability, finance, films, which is a really awesome creative outlet, and the cafe. And really our new model here, so conscious consumers, we're looking to make things locally, reduce waste, reduce inventory, provide living wages, and use biodegradable materials. So maybe I'll stop there. So we'll have Heidi's opportunity to introduce as well.
Wonderful, thanks, Lisa. Yeah, Heidi, the floor is yours.
Sounds good, thank you. I wrote down a few things so I don't forget. So just to introduce Knix, it is a Toronto-based women's intimate apparel company founded in 2013 by CEO Joanna Griffiths. The mission from day one was always to empower women to be unapologetically free. And then in terms of my story with Knix, I first found out about the brand a couple of years ago when I was looking for swimwear up and down West 4th. And then after being rejected a couple of times, they finally hired me as a sales associate and I worked up from there. The thing I loved about Knix straight away was that they are genuinely sustainable. They're not perfect, but it's not something they advertise, so I knew it wasn't greenwashing. In a sector traditionally profiting off insecurity and exclusivity, Knix forced open the door and took a seat at the table, rethinking products in favor of inclusivity and functionality. So Knix's first product was the leak-proof underwear, and it's probably what they're most famous for now. With a moisture-wicking cotton blend gusset, this product was designed for sweat, blood, and incontinence. Interestingly, more than 80% of women experience overflow during their periods, and 1/3 of women experience light incontinence in the years after childbirth. These statistics are painfully unsurprising to some of us. Moving forward, this staple product is now sold in 3 absorbency levels, and the same technology was applied to the production of leak-proof swimwear, nursing bras, tanks, postpartum underwear, and activewear. A huge part of Knix is its customer empowerment. Within our Knix teen range, we are fighting menstruation as a taboo among young women and teens. So all the Knix teen products are tax exempt, and they have an innovative marketing strategy through like TikTok and Instagram, and also they have really funky different designs. Back in 2013, the first product was released collaboratively through a crowdfunding effort, and Knix has really been listening to its customers ever since. So today we stock a fully inclusive size range and sell our best-selling products in 5 shades of nude. Interestingly, also the brand shoots, all our products are modeled by real customers. And then in terms of social business, at Knix we provide more than just high quality products. Every year we donate more than $1 million worth of product to women's shelters across Canada. And we've created a community in which women feel supported and empowered both in store and online. So I work on the floor of West 4th store, and we love meeting your dogs. Our dressing rooms are always open for mothers who are nursing or just need a break. It's just really great vibes. And all along, Joanna's goal was always to connect to a mission greater than us. And with market-leading high-quality products, Knix advocates for a minimalist way of life that can be sustained. So on that topic, Knix is making moves when it comes to environmental sustainability. We're a strong proponent of ethical sourcing. All of our products are designed in Canada and manufactured in Asia, but with socially and environmentally responsible factories. Our strategic manufacturing facilities are approved by RAP, which is the Worldwide Accredited Production, SA 8000, which is Social Accountability International, and Okotex, who all hold themselves to the highest standards of compliance. So essentially, one pair of super leak-proof underwear can absorb up to 5 to 6 tampons worth of liquid, and that same pair, if well cared for, so washed on cold and hung or lay flat to dry, can be used for up to 2 years. In terms of waste prevention, therefore, it's no question that Knix provides consumers with a sustainable option. And as we move towards a more accessible price point, Knix will also increasingly combat menstrual inequity. Against fast fashion, Knix doesn't follow trends, and unlike fast fashion, it doesn't rely on planned obsolescence. Our best-selling wireless bra, the Wing Woman Contour Bra, remains consistent. We don't want women to come in just because there's a new style to buy. We want them to use the product till the end of its lifetime, and if we can't repair it, then replace it. I work on the floor at Knix, and every shift I fit customers for bras and see that they've been wearing the same style for years. So they find one they love and they just stick with it. That's the functionality that Knix strives for. So when it comes to sustainability, Knix is proud to say we're in a space of learning. As the CEO, Joanna Griffiths, put it, the only thing that successful people have in common is that they didn't quit. And it's an exciting journey to be on. So I'm going to drop a discount code and my email in the chat if you have any questions as well.
Wonderful, thanks Heidi. So yeah, that was really great. Thank you to all the speakers for giving that introduction to kind of get us started on our conversation today. So now that we've kind of, heard this introduction of sustainability for each brand, I'd like to ask, I guess, specifically about our topic, what role that being local specifically has played for each brand in terms of like that sustainable effort in, a world that is so globally connected. Why is being local important to your sustainability efforts? I'm not sure if anyone would like to volunteer to start, or I can just pick names, but
I can start. We can just sort of follow that same process if you like.
totally.
I mean, from the beginning, I wanted to have a full understanding of our supply chain of everything. That's why we wanted to make goods in Canada from start to finish before realizing that the industrialization age of Canadian textiles has sort of come and gone. That's why I started out making our first t-shirts, why I met with the seamstresses at the beginning, why we are in factories in Vancouver, and why we've helped co-develop all of that is because if we don't understand what's going on, we don't know what the problems are and we can't fix them. And that's why we've sort of always focused on being as close to home as possible. But it's difficult because, as you mentioned, the textile industry is an extremely global entity. We can't grow cotton in Canada. So if you're doing cotton here, you're clearly not getting it from here. So I think that and I'm sure everybody on this board can speak to just sort of the logistical nightmares that you run into in regards to, trimmings, fabrics, importing, exporting, ports, rails, the movement of goods. But then on top of that as well, the golden age of textiles in Canada it's gone. So we've lost a lot of the intellectual property that is needed to create the textiles that we as consumers then demand. So we're running into a lot of problems where the consumer market wants made in Canada, but they also want it at a very accessible price point, which makes it difficult because we've lost a lot of the understanding on how, it can be as simple as how you change the tensioning on a single needle machine, how you operate a serger, how you sew on a button. Ingrid, you guys were doing that earlier this week, and it's amazing to see the disconnect between the consumer and what's needed to put into making the good. So, like for us, I think the more education that we can bring to what is actually going into making your clothing, the more impact and the more understanding that the consumer then can see whether it's worth it or not. So that's sort of like the main, I guess, problem. And I guess a little bit of our solution as well is we just try to bring awareness to how much energy and effort does go into the manufacturing of goods.
For sure, yeah. If I could just ask a quick follow-up to that, you mentioned kind of the golden age of material production within Canada. Yeah. Do you think that that's an area where there is potential for a lot of growth for, students like us going into the job force and that sort of thing?
Yeah, it's difficult. Yes and no. I think it's going to be, out of Vancouver, we've seen very, very large and very successful multinational brands come out of there, as well as Toronto with Knix. You have Arc'teryx, you have Lulu. They're coming out of spaces and areas where people have the opportunity to fail, but they also have the opportunity to learn from the system that's around them. As that intellectual property leaves, we start losing that opportunity. But that also being said, with Lulu having their head office in Kits and then Arc'teryx bringing theirs back to North Van, we're starting to see a lot of that intellectual property feed back into the Lower Mainland, which is really important because if we do want to see a future, we need those head offices and we need that brain dump of intellectual property to solve the complex problems that are ahead of us. So I think we're at a little bit of a turning point on whether we want to continue to see textiles and the intellectual property that's needed to create them here in Vancouver in the Lower Mainland, because we are a port city, and behind Los Angeles, Vancouver is the second largest textile port on the West Coast. So there is a very large opportunity for us to blossom as a leader. There's also a little bit going against us in the terms of cost of living, so as well as space to rent. So I think it's it's a bit of a knife's edge. It's definitely going to showcase in the next 5 to 10 years whether we continue to choose to make Vancouver hopefully a leader in this world. And hopefully all the students here listening can, use our education and our creativity to help solve some of these problems that we're coming up to.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you. Lisa, yeah, in terms of thoughts about, for ecologists, what role local really plays for your sustainability efforts?
Yeah, I guess with the history of operating in this space for like basically 20 years, we've learned to listen to our community. We're specifically supporting the Pacific Northwest community, but that doesn't mean it only sort of is valuable for that demographic, if that makes sense. Also, we did have a different method of production. So we were a wholesale model, we were a global distribution before, and it was something that the founder was very passionate about changing. So in 2015, we moved all manufacturing back to North America. The only one that's not in Canada is a knitting facility. So that's in New York, but otherwise it's across Canada. And then particularly understanding the craft that's required to put together garments. I mean, that's reflective in our own factory facility. It's pretty amazing when people walk in and actually witness clothing being made. It's also where our repairs happens. People can send back all of their clothing that maybe has a tear, a missing button, that kind of stuff. That's repairs for life. That also supports people who live within the vicinity, or would like their product to last a little bit longer. That's really important. We also partner with community members. So whether it's different nations or individual organizations that we like to work with, we like to partner with people who have basically the same commitment to sustainability, and that's reflected in our hard goods and product development. But when you were speaking about the skills gap, Paul, it's really interesting. Actually, there was a few companies that put together a program at Kwantlen Polytechnic University, which is where I also attended part of my studies. And really, they were trying to provide specific skill sets that are required from each of these companies, and basically develop people targeted to fill those roles locally. It's really interesting to see Arc'teryx have their facility where they teach sewing as part, and then hire those people into that factory. Also here people can learn at our factory. They can sit down and watch us. We've hosted workshops and things like that before. But it really is, There's I think another university, BCIT, a college maybe, where they're working on sort of, how do you say that? It's like it's not people that will develop it, it's machines. So they're developing machines to take over the role of that people would play in this. So I don't know if that's the only answer. Like, we want to support people and economic growth and jobs here. But it's just some different ways of looking at the problem and finding different solutions.
For sure. Yeah. Thanks for your comment on that. When you mentioned the transition, I guess, from that more like global focus to local in terms of the production at Ecologist, was that, I guess, I mean, I'm sure there were challenges associated with that transition. Do you think that's something that is realistic for a lot of companies to have that transition, or?
I think it's required. It's kind of like, we look at how things are going to be developed in the future. There's definitely efficiencies when you work in a global ecosystem, right? There's people who have mastered the craft, but I think there's also something to be said for supporting the local economy and jobs in the local area. And this was by no means an easy experience. We also transitioned from synthetic blends to 100% naturals in a lot of cases. So that was another, not only like financial burden, but also it takes a really long time to evolve a product line. So we're still continuing to work on that, but where we can, we try to source locally to make sure that money is staying within the Canadian economy.
For sure, thank you. And then for Heidi, just like local applications and importance with Knix. If you could speak to that.
Yeah, so Knix isn't a brand local to Vancouver. It's Toronto based, and obviously we do have manufacturing abroad in Asia. But the community ethos is really important to Knix. So there was suggestion of being more online focused, especially during the pandemic. But we found that having stores so you can build up a community within local areas and really get to know people and know the customer and what the customer wants was really central to Knix's focus. And an example of that is we recently came out with merino wool base layers, and they knew that that was what people on the East Coast wanted. They knew their communities, and I think that's a really nice part of it. So even as Knix grows to be more of an international brand, we are collaborating with smaller brands through the papaya boxes, which is kind of like a marketing technique for people to buy from smaller businesses, small pieces of jewelry, like scarves and things by smaller businesses and creators in Canada. And so you can kind of get the word out about that. And then any Knix art that you see, so those tote bags that everyone has or on the walls in the store, each store collaborates with a local artist. So that means the ones in the US have US artists from their state, and then the Toronto drawings are all different from the Vancouver ones. So like, even though it's more of a multinational brand now, definitely community focus is really important to Knix.
For sure. Yeah, that's really great to hear. Like, yeah, how you can kind of, bring in both, and that doesn't have to go away, even if you are a national company, for sure. I think, all the panelists have kind of touched on this a little bit, but I was hoping to maybe explore a little bit more about what exactly were like the challenges and triumphs related to kind of, the sustainable process. I know Lisa touched on, some of the like upfront costs with transitioning that can be difficult, but then some of the, the benefits of being community-based. If there was like, maybe one challenge, one triumph that stands out most to your experience, I'd love to hear.
I mean, there hasn't been one sort of specific one. I think, Heidi said that their motto is they just keep going, at Knix, that they just don't stop. That very much seems to be our case as well. Most, especially, I think everybody can agree over the last 2 years, it's been nothing but a roller coaster. Our goods are getting seized at the border more often. We're facing more delays. Shipping containers have gone up astronomically. Fuel prices have gone up. Everything has, and that's just one side of the story. It seems that to be able to be nimble over the last 2 years has definitely been our most shining feature. Honestly, it's every time you turn around, there's a problem that you've never even thought of. There's a term called a black swan, which is essentially something that nobody has ever seen before and changes history as we know it. The last 2 years have been black swans every other week. So I think anybody that has got this far over the last 2 years, their mobility and their nimbleness to deal with problems and not get so hooked up has definitely been our sort of shining light.
For sure, thanks.
Maybe I'll take the next one, Ingrid. Okay, awesome. I think one challenge is being responsible. And what I mean by that is every aspect of our choices that we make, whether we're basically you have to measure in order to understand what steps you can take to reduce impact. And so that's been one of our biggest challenges, and also I think a triumph. That's basically the actions that we're taking right now are per product assessments. We were, as a business, offset for 2020 through carbon offsets, but it is a mixed bag of actions. You have to at the same time, sort of survey and look at all of the things that can contribute to an emissions factor, and then work with everyone on the same team, basically, to make those things become reality. Ideas are cheap, actions are a whole other thing, right? They take a lot of effort, and every single team member now has a green goal or an ecological goal or a sustainability goal. So really everyone on the team is involved at Ecologist to make sure that we're taking steps in all aspects of our business. Getting rid of synthetic materials is a huge challenge. It's really everywhere, from sewing threads to zippers to trims, you name it. So that's something that we're really committed to making moves on as well.
Yeah, I think it's a difficult question. I know a challenge for Knix in terms of going into a sustainable realm has been in the materials. We would love to use more recycled materials. We've recently started doing organic cotton, and then we had the wool pieces that came out over Christmas. But a lot of, because in intimate clothing, there are certain textiles that you should and shouldn't be using because people have sensitivities. So our seamless underwear is still a nylon spandex blend, which isn't ideal, but I know it's something they're looking at in head office. It's a really challenging thing to get around because it needs to be functional. We need the bras to be supportive without a wire, which is a lot harder than it sounds. And then with the underwear, it has to be really hygienic to clean, especially if it's going to be menstrual underwear that you're going to reuse for a year, 2 years. So I know with the materials, it's not as simple for us as just, you know, not that it's simple to use recycled materials, but like to find them and start doing it, it's also got to be something that all the customers are comfortable with. And then in terms of success, I think Knix is really proud this year that we've managed to bring the price point down. So it is an investment to get our reusable period underwear, for example, or any of Knix products. They are at a higher price point because they're made to last. But I know that makes it slightly more inaccessible. But this year they've managed to bring the price down, and then they also have a trial period with all of our underwear where you can actually buy it and use it and wash it and wear it for 30 days. And then if it doesn't work for you, you can bring it back for a refund. So it allows more people to be involved and try it out and see if it works. Whereas before it would have been quite an exclusive market.
Yeah, for sure. It's good to hear about, minimizing those barriers for sure. I know, materials was brought up a bit. We actually do have a question from the audience about materials, specifically for Anion. Just a question about where the raw unprocessed textiles come from. Do they come from donations from thrift stores? Like, what is the secondhand textile collection process like?
Yeah, so we all know that the textile industry is an extremely global entity. Anion works within that framework. So our post-consumer waste, so that's like even the shirt I'm wearing, if you go to our website, all of those goods, any of our wovens, we don't have dyes, and all of that comes out of Asia landfills. So what happens is it typically gets, donated, and if nobody buys it, it sort of goes around, and we've seen those, there's been a couple documentaries, there's been a couple images out there, and they're sort of, you could call them like a soft landfill essentially. And we work with rag houses. So what rag houses specialize in is they essentially work with these different donation centers at the end of that line. So when these goods are deemed to have no more added value, so like if you drop something off at a donation center, it either has value added or not. At a certain point, if there is just too much non-perceived valued goods, it has to go somewhere. So a lot of the time they do end up back in Asia, North Africa, India. And we work with different rag houses, and they're called pickers. And then what we do is we actually go through those sort of shipping containers. A lot of people refer to them as soft landfills. But essentially what we do is we have these huge warehouses. They're about the size of like an NFL field. And you start sorting all of those goods by, first you go by textile. So whether it's a wool or a cotton or a cashmere, if it's a natural hair or a cotton or a fiber. And then from there, we're able to break it down into the different colorways themselves. So all of our line that we come out with this year is actually predetermined by going upstream to see what we have access to in metric tonnage, because that determines the colorways that you will then see in all of our clothing. So this coming fall, if we release a different tone, maybe it's a blue or a gray or a green, we don't ever get to actually choose the specific Pantone color, which can cause a lot of problems in today's digital age. We just sort of have to go with like, we want a blue-ish or a dark navy-ish. And we really don't get to hone in on any of that colorway until we're into the recarding process itself. So prior to the pandemic, we were trying to set up rag houses in the Lower Mainland, but a lot of that intellectual property is from overseas. And we've been trying to work with Immigration Canada to get some of those individuals here. So then we can sort of chop that global shipping out. But again, it's a slow process. So right now we work within the confinements of the global system, and we sort of have to go to these the end of the line for the rags themselves.
For sure. Thank you for that explanation. We have a follow-up question. If materials are being imported from Asia, to what extent is manufacturing locally decreasing the environmental impact? I think you did speak to wanting to maybe switch that a little bit, but if you could elaborate.
Yeah, so whenever we look at the textile industry, we do need to accept a certain level of movement of goods. So if you're making cotton in Canada, it's not coming from Canada. A lot of the industrial wools are going to be from New Zealand or Western Australia. And then a lot of the dye houses aren't going to be in Canada. There are a couple here, which is awesome, or North America. But essentially, the way that the whole system was created was a zigzagging of connecting different countries. Not to say that this isn't something that can be addressed, and that's what we are hoping to do with, setting up a rag house here. I think for us right now, we're still trying to play within the confines of the system and make do with and make the best impact we can with the system as it is as a whole before we can really start addressing the larger system. But it just goes back to, we still want our goods made somewhere where I can visit and talk to on a daily basis. So for me, it's still very important, as I think it is everybody here, to understand how your goods are made and where they're made. So we don't really have any plan of moving our production anywhere. So it's a bit of a catch-22.
Yeah, good points for sure. Yeah, I will field another question. Maybe we'll give Paul a break from talking. So maybe if Lisa would like to address this one next. But yeah, in attempting kind of to move away from this idea of fast fashion and high turnover, what do you hope the lifetime of one of your products looks like for the consumer?
What I hope that looks like is just as you look at your grandparents or your parents' old sweater, like that's what we want you to look at our product like. We would love for you to keep that your whole life. What I understand from fast fashion, it's 8 to 10 wears and then done, which is really significant, in terms of creating that product, shipping that product, utilizing that, and then having that basically go to a landfill in a lot of cases. Yeah, what we see, we offer repairs. So it's really important for us that we're able to extend the life of a product. By doing that, usually it lasts 1.3 times longer. We also offer a second life program, so you can resell Ecologists product back right to another person. So we, again, keep that product out of landfill. But we also design with longevity in mind. So it's a really more simple core product that you can wear every day. Another recommendation I can say is product care is climate action. As soon as you pop something in the dryer, you're increasing microfiber shedding, whether it's natural or synthetic. It degrades the product faster. The less you wash it, that's saving in energy and water. So especially when we're using things like merino wool, which doesn't really need to be washed as often, we're designing products with those considerations. It's antimicrobial on purpose. We're using those as base layers. So there's just some considerations throughout the entire product development stage. We also design things, every product meeting we have, which is all done in-house here, every fitting and everything like that. The trims we use are also with the consideration, can this be repaired easily? So keep those products, keep using them. It's estimated, I think, that when you stop using a product, it still lives in your closet for about a year after you've decided you no longer want to wear it. It's kind of not really a conscious thing. It's just sort of what happens. And typically after that year, the potential for that product to go out of style increases exponentially, right? So someone else can't use that product either. So really, we just want people to be conscious of what they're purchasing, if they really need a product, and if it fulfills multiple activities that they want to participate in. So, it's not just a one dress for one event kind of thing. It really fulfills multiple needs. Those are a few things.
For sure. Yeah, if either Heidi or Paul would like to address that, then I think, the floor is yours. Then we have some other questions from the audience.
Yeah, I can follow that. I completely agree with what Lisa was saying. I think in the sphere of underwear, it can be a bit difficult in terms of lifetime because it's something you're wearing every single day. And especially with our sports bras, like they're going to go through a lot. They might not last forever, and we understand that. So I think, we always emphasize about taking care of the products. And then it's not an official Knix statement, but the amount of times when people come in and say, like, it did break, we do send it off to try and fix it, or we'll replace it for them. It's like we want to encourage that rather than just throwing it away and then repurchasing if you do have the financial means to do that. So yeah, definitely just taking care of the products. It's always like we give out wash bags with all of our products to use, and then it's machine wash on cold and then hang or lie flat to dry. So I think that's exactly it. And then with Knix, luckily, I think trends aren't as much as a problem with underwear as they are in other fast fashion elements. Generally, especially with bras, if you find something you like, you are more inclined to stick with it anyway. So I think we're quite lucky in that respect that we don't have to address changing fashion trends and everything. Yeah.
Yeah, and like hygiene is super important with undergarments. So of course, like, you know, longevity to an extent, right? But then there's the natural limit of those products as well, which is an important factor, I think. Yeah.
For sure. All right, so we'll move on to maybe one of the questions from the audience, particularly about this idea of growing your company while staying sustainable. Is there a tipping point to the extent that you can grow a business without, contributing to overconsumption, and like ways to maybe mitigate that, if you've addressed any of those in your experiences?
Maybe I'll take this one. It's difficult. Yeah, it is difficult. There are some challenges that you'll face while trying to grow a company. But really at every stage of the business, it's important to consider all stakeholders and the environment as one of those stakeholders. Something that was really important to the founder is that people are paid a fair living wage. So that's something that has been now certified from our business. We want all people to win. Again, with that overconsumption and production, it actually costs more to produce less, right? Like there's economies of scale when you go into the larger businesses, and that really contributes to the overproduction problem and then the waste problem in the end of that. It's really disheartening to hear people, or organizations rather, burning product, that people have notified everyone that that's occurring. So we want to avoid that altogether. Yeah, it's something that we've really honed in on in a fewer better model. We've even tested out on-demand production, so creating pieces as they sell, basically, from our factory, which has been a really good learning process. But yeah, it really is. It is a challenge, but if you're committed, you can be creative in how that you approach those challenges.
Yeah, I think it breaks down to being creative. And I also think we need to move away from the idea that there are sustainable companies and non-sustainable companies. We need to move into the fact that it just needs to be the standard, especially with everybody coming up into the industry. We are seeing a generational movement. So as the youth move into entrepreneurship, starting out their own businesses, just as all the panelists here are seeing, we can use our own creativity to create and forge an industry that doesn't have a sustainable department, but is simply sustainable. And I think 10 years ago, it was like, okay, we'll hire one, outside entity to do an evaluation and see how we're sustainable or not. And now with all three of us companies here, it's in our very roots itself. So I think we sort of I know it's almost counterintuitive, but we almost need to move back and say, well, we don't want a sustainable part of a company. The whole company itself needs to be sustainable. And with the growth definitely comes problems, but it also comes the opportunity to creatively address those sorts of opportunities and problems head on.
Yeah, I would just completely agree with that. I think it's not necessarily about the size of the company versus how sustainable it is as well. I think as we've moved into this era of social media and more accountability, I think, especially in the case of Knix, it's had to become more sustainable, even though at the beginning, the ethos really wasn't environmental sustainability. It was female empowerment and making functional underwear. And now we've sort of had to transition, just as every company should.
Mhm.
For sure, those are really great points, and honestly kind of inspiring as well. So kind of a related question, a little bit different. Is there ways in which the local government or, you know, federal, provincial could help local businesses become more sustainable, specifically within fashion? Like, are there any direct ways you can think of with that?
I mean, there is, but it's also extremely difficult to implement and to govern. The textile industry is a global entity, you know, and we have seen marketing tactics within the textile industry work time and time again, and they just get redone, respun, and then pushed out the door again. I mean, you can go to a dozen different fast fashion stores, and every year they pull out a wool shirt or a wool coat, and it can have as low as 15 to 20% of the actual product that they're pushing. And it's difficult because if the good isn't made here, is it dyed here? Is it traceable here? And with it being such a global system, does the end user or the end government, are they held accountable for the process of it, or is it the beginning? And it turns into a little bit of a who is going to take responsibility for that process. That being said, there are a lot of certifications that are coming out, whether it's the GRS, which is the Global Recycled Standard, the GOTS, the different dye houses, all these sort of certifications are starting to be non-government related because they can transfer over borders, which is actually very important because the textile industry is not a single border entity, as we know. So I think there is room for government support. I'm I'm a little bit more of the mindset that it's going to be the private industry and individuals and individual companies governing themselves that push out there and show the government as well as the consumers and sort of react to consumers saying, hey, like, is this GOT certified? Where is this from? What sort of, what backing do you have to follow up on your say? But that's just sort of my take.
That's awesome, Paul. I feel like there's a private and regulatory partnership that's possible. We are definitely going to have to be challenging what we perceive as the limitations, but it will start from voluntarily sharing information. Once that voluntarily shared information becomes like the expected delivery, then I feel like the ripples will sort of occur naturally, which is what we're seeing when brands are sharing environmental social governance, or they're taking additional steps to really share information about every aspect of their business. But I feel like there's a really good opportunity to work with waste management, maybe private or public facilities, to make sure that we have something within Canada to deal with the end of life products, essentially. Why we focus on monomaterials is because it's really easy to separate those and then put them into new life streams. There's some really great innovative companies that are also working on blended materials for regenerated fibers and things like that. There's tons of cool projects that are happening across North America, Canada, Europe, across the globe, really. So everything, I feel like everything is possible. I want to leave this on like a very positive note. Whatever problem you seek to solve, someone has probably already tried to attempt finding a solution to that. So yeah, I would say remain positive and hopeful that we can all tackle that together. And it will also require collaboration, I think. We want to lift up together, because then we'll get closer to those goals, the Sustainable Development Goals, or not hitting that 1.5 degree temperature increase globally if we partner.
Yeah, I agree with that. And just to add to it, I think anything local governments can do, and institutions like UBC, to promote education, to tell people about greenwashing and things like that, that's only going to do good as well.
For sure. Yeah, that I like how we ended off on that kind of uplifting note. I think we have time we've got one more audience question here. So I'll field that one and then we'll maybe wrap up. But yeah, kind of more related to in the age of social media and trends just being out of control. How are your brands specifically kind of responding to the ever-changing trend cycle and managing that within a sustainable framework?
Yeah, I think that sort of goes back to, a little bit of Lisa and Heidi's earlier answer on the design. Put your horse blinders on and focus on what you're good at. Don't worry about everything else. They're probably not worrying about you either. Like, those trends don't care about you. So if you're focused on making, your specific product, I think that's really important, because the trends, they are trends. They come, they go. So in our world of textiles, we just need to focus on creating a long-lasting garment that has multi-purpose use, whether it is dining room, out for a hike, intimates that can be worn time and time again. Like that's really important. And I think we also need to understand that the social media world is so hyper active. Like, we can see the whole thing explode and die down within a 24-hour cycle. So as everybody sort of moves into their own businesses and their own future, just really realize, like, your core value on what you're creating is what's important to you, because that's what started out your journey. So keep that in mind as the whole hurricane goes on around you. Try to find a little bit of calm in the center, and maybe take a minute or two to think before we all just jump on the next social media craze. Because I think everybody on this panel is doing a really good job in their own world and their own specific field. So I think it is important, just focus on what we can do to cause a positive impact, and just keep at it, really.
I love that. One thing I like to really focus on for our community is supporting people wherever they're at in their own sustainability journey. Everyone is at a different learning process, at a different stage, at a different understanding. They have their own set of values that they bring to everything that they do. So we want to respect everybody in that process. There's some really cool things happening on social too. It's not all bad. I feel like, for influencers, there's a new thing called Dress X, where you can digitally create clothing. So you're not rebuying a new clothing piece kind of every week to then share on social or whatever. There's I know that also takes energy and, to produce a digital asset. But it's just, there are many ways to be creative and share your self-expression via these channels. And it's easy to get overwhelmed. There's a lot of information and you have to sift through the data. I think the important thing is to really find sources that you trust for your information, that you can go back to, that align with your values or what you care about.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. I think also it would be tough to demonize social media and influencers and everything, when actually it can be a really good source of information saying which brands are good to go to and personal recommendations and things like that. And I know that Knix benefits from social media a lot, just from raising awareness of the brand. And then once we get them in the store, they're not going to keep coming back. They just know about it and they know where to come when they need something.
Yeah, that's I think a nice note to end off on. Thank you so much to all three of you for sharing your experience and wisdom with us today, and answering these questions. I know it's been really informative for me and really sparked a curiosity to learn more and engage more with local businesses, but also how that can play out in the fashion sphere. So to wrap up, I also just like to say thank you to everyone for attending today. I hope it's also been informative and curiosity sparking for everyone else. Just wanted to also quickly share that, of course, this is part of Sustainable Fashion Week. So it's not the last event that we have going on for this week here. Later today, actually, we do have another discussion about the global fashion supply chain. So if you'd like kind of to have those both two perspectives, that'll be at 5 p.m. And it's led by Sophia Yang from Threading Change. Very exciting stuff. I think Paul actually might have mentioned this earlier. We also have a drop-in clothing repair workshop tomorrow. It'll be happening in the SURS building in person, and it starts at 11:30 a.m. And then we'll also have a panel discussion on the youth in the fashion industry at 5 p.m. tomorrow online. And then our final event on Friday at 12 is a final discussion, which is local meet global, which was really, about bringing together some of the stuff that we were talking about today locally and globally later, and wrapping it up all together. So I will put the website with all of the sign up links for that in the chat if anyone's curious. But otherwise, yeah, thank you so much again to our panelists and everyone for attending.
Ingrid, could I say one more thing?
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, okay. I have a task for people in the audience here. If you reach out to me with a couple of things that you're committed to in terms of your own sustainability journey, we have 5 things up for grab. So if you want to reach out to me on LinkedIn, just shoot a message with your couple of things that you're committed to, and we'd love to reward that.
That sounds great. Thanks, Lisa. Yeah.
Wonderful. Well, thank you for having us, Ingrid.
Yeah, no worries.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
It's been lovely. All right. We'll see you later.
See ya.